Earlier this year, I made a video on Janus motorcycles and my overall first impressions, which were somewhat of a mixed bag. And if you had not seen that particular video, I strongly encourage you to go ahead and watch that first, because you're probably going to be totally out of the loop if you only watched this video. So as far as I'm aware, I am one of the very few, if only, YouTubers who has criticized Janus in some ways. I see a lot of these reviews or impressions videos where the uploaders or whoever is just praising these bikes up and down as if they're the greatest things ever produced. I, on the other hand, went into my review, or excuse me, my impressions, as unbiased as I could possibly be, and overall, it seemed to be somewhat of a hit among viewers. Now, of course, there were people who were very upset with me and or those who didn't agree with my opinions or views on these bikes, but here's the thing. You're never going to please everyone regardless of what you do or say. It is what it is. And furthermore, like I said in the previous video, I am absolutely not bashing Janus on their bikes or them as a company. I love these bikes, even with the complaints I had. I praised the bikes on their styling, their wonderful suspension, and comfortability. Hell, I even defended them on their use of that Chinese engine. I guess some people thought that I was being a negative Nancy when talking about Janus, and that's just silly in all honesty. There's pros and cons of every single bike or really thing out there. Hell, even my favorite motorcycles have problems. For example, my VMAX has to go to the shop every single year for some stupid annoying issue, and my Yamaha Bolt has probably the worst, most awkward, and uncomfortable airbox in the world that rests right up against my knee the entire time I ride. But you know what? I still love the bikes with all my heart and don't plan on ever getting rid of them. I want Janus to be a successful company. I want them to learn from the complaints that I and others have so that Janus can only improve from here, not just on the design, but improve as a company overall. They have a great design going for them. They just need to iron out all the kinks to make their bikes as perfect as they could possibly be. That being said, I wanted to make this sort of follow-up video to clear up some things I didn't mention or forgot to add in the original video, as well as address some comments that the viewers had. Now, the first and most commonly brought up thing was how Janus bikes were very high priced at $7,000, and that's without including any of the various mods or additional cosmetic designs you can add to the bike. One guy brought up a very valid point. Janus is a very small American business, all things considered. They are not mass producing these bikes whatsoever, so because of that, these bikes are going to be higher in price. That and parts of these motorcycles are made by the Amish, and Amish made stuff, as we all know, is usually never cheap. But in the same token, they are more often than not made with very high quality materials and excellent craftsmanship. So of course the price of these motorcycles, given all that information, is going to be higher than that of, say, a Yamaha, Suzuki, Kawasaki, really anything that's mass produced on a regular basis. It's the same concept as other small locally owned businesses. More often than not, whatever it is that the companies are making is going to be priced a little bit higher than that of their big box competitors, and that could be with anything when you think about it. Tools, audio equipment, food, furniture, really anything. Now, say Janus ends up being a massive success and gets to that point of them no longer being a small business and maybe getting to the point of mass production, the $7,000 price tag may in fact drop to $6,000 or $5,000, but we won't know unless that happens. Do I personally anticipate them to drop the price of their bikes? I don't at all, only because even with some of the parts being imported from around the world, we really don't know what Janus's profit margin is on these bikes. For all we know, they're only making 10 or 20% profit per bike sold. Would dropping the price increase sales? Yeah, I suppose it would, but then again, what's the profit margin if they did do that? Would they be able to make enough of a profit to keep the business afloat? we don't know. Another point I should address is the break-in period of the engine and transmission. You see, it's very possible that these clunky transmissions that I had talked about in the original video were that way because the motorcycles themselves had yet to hit its break-in period. Some bikes do handle and act completely different once that break-in period has been established. Case in point, my Kawasaki Versys transmission was a little funky until I cracked that break-in period and did its first oil change. So there is a chance that the Janus bikes I test rode had yet to hit that period, but I'm not quite sure what that period really is. There were a few people who said I completely missed the point of these motorcycles, saying that these bikes were meant to be for those who have the money for a luxury bike with retro styling, a conversation piece of sorts that is great for back roads, weekend trips, and so on, even going as far to say as these bikes should not be compared to a Honda, Kawasaki, etc., etc. So, a few things. Not to sound like a complete asshole here, but I do not consider Janus bikes to be a luxury motorcycle whatsoever, just because they are expensive and hard to come across. They're just not. They have absolutely zero luxury features that a real luxury bike would have, unless you're considering the style of the bike to be luxury, which I guess that may be true, but as far as features and being made with super high quality materials all the way around, that's up for debate. As far as Janus not being able to be compared to other bikes, I'm sorry, but that's a load of shit. There's no reason I can't compare a Janus bike to really anything around the same engine size, and if we want to compare other retro-styled bikes to the Janus, okay, that's totally fine, we can do that, because there's plenty of them on the market for me to do so. For example, the best of all retro-styled bikes around the same engine size of the Janus, in my opinion, is absolutely, without any hesitation, the Suzuki Van 200. Yes, technically the engine is smaller, however the Van has a very slightly higher horsepower to its engine at 15 horses, where the Janus has 14. Furthermore, the Van, even though it keeps that kinda 60s, 70s style, it has the amenities of a modern motorcycle, such as fuel injection, a much better, easier to read speedometer, and it's a dual sport, so technically this bike is more versatile. Yeah, I'm sure you could throw a pair of off-road tires on a Janus, but would you want to? Probably not. Also, consider the price point. $4,600 versus the $7,000 Janus. The Van is a ridiculously fun, relatively cheap, stupid reliable bike, and even though the engine is small and nothing compared to, say, my VMAX or even the Bolt for that matter, it still puts a smile on my face anytime I get a chance to ride it. It's a fun bike, and you can ride it on a highway and not feel too underpowered or unstable. Let's take another example of an old school bike, the Honda Monkey, a small $4,000 bike originally from the 1960s with a 125cc engine. Now, obviously, you're not going anywhere quick with one of these, even after you soup it up. But if I recall, that's kind of the point with these smaller engine bikes. And as this gentleman said, the Janus is a conversation piece, kind of sort of meant for weekend rides, back roads, or for fun, I guess, whatever. Well, if that's the case, I could argue that the Monkey and the Van fit this description perfectly fine. Do they not? Plus, it's a Honda, and unless you're beating the shit out of the bike, going out of your way to destroy it, these monkeys, like the Van, are stupid reliable. And the last bikes I want to bring up when comparing to the Janus are Royal Enfield. Anytime I go on forums or online in general, the one company I always see Janus compared to when it comes to these retro-styled bikes is Royal Enfield. If I recall correctly, most, if not all, of Royal Enfield's bikes are cheaper than Janus bikes, and all of them have bigger engines. Granted, it seems like Royal Enfields have a hit or miss when it comes to reliability. I've heard people praise them up and down, and I've also heard people bash them, so it's kind of a mixed bag. However, Royal Enfield, unlike Janus, does have fuel-injected bikes. And some people might criticize me for having a problem with retro-styled bikes made nowadays with carbs. Here's the thing. I'm all about retro styling. That's all fine and dandy, but when you're paying a ton of money for a motorcycle, all things considered, why not just have the bikes with modern parts and features that are only going to benefit the rider in the long run? If these Janus bikes were cheaper, I wouldn't really care if it was carbureted, only because at that price point, it kind of makes sense. Sure, maybe the Janus bikes are easy to work on, but that's not quite the point I'm making here. Here's an analogy. Would you buy a car nowadays for, let's say, $30,000 that's styled like a car from the 50s or 60s? Horrific gas mileage, carburetors that you have to choke every single time, and maintenance, and absolutely zero modern features, including safety features that you would otherwise have standard on even the cheapest base model car in today's day and age? I'd gather to say that you wouldn't. And please don't assume I'm calling Janus bikes unreliable. We have no idea how reliable they actually are as of yet because they simply haven't been around long enough. They haven't proven to be reliable or unreliable. They kind of have to stand the test of time before they can be accurately judged on that. Yes, Janus has stated again that their bikes are very easy to work on, and they even provide tutorials on YouTube in case you do need to work on your bike, which is amazing for them to do. I don't think any other motorcycle company has done this or ever will in the future, so great on them for doing that. These Janus bikes definitely have a market going for them, that's for sure. I obviously don't fit that bill, but what's wrong with that? They fit a very small niche market. That's unfortunate for Janus because I 100% believe that if Janus were to introduce a new bike to their lineup with a 4 or even 500cc engine styled in a similar way as their other bikes, they would not only sell much more bikes, but they'd be way more profitable long term. 250cc bikes fit a very small audience, and Janus, in a way, is alienating a huge market for those wanting a retro bike with a good amount of power behind it. I want Janus to be profitable, and I want them to be a massive success. Not that they aren't, however, the amount of bikes they could be selling and the amount of money they could be making isn't what it could be. Maybe, hopefully, in the future, they decide to change their minds on that, but I don't know. They've shown to be dead set on sticking to the smaller 250cc market. At the end of the day, even if they don't make a bigger bike, I'd at least hope they would address the problems I had and others had about their bikes, like the brakes and the awkward transmission. If all they do is simply fix those things, then you know what? I'd be totally fine with it. And I think a lot of people who are going to buy a Janus bike or even already have one would be happier with those changes long term. And that's really where I'm at with this whole thing, guys. Thank you all very much for watching. I hope you all take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.